quick overview of rendering in Houdini. This is going to be a little bit different than usual, as I'm not going to make every single node as we go, because I want to try to do this as fast as possible. Because this is a pretty kind of in-depth subject, and I don't want to bore your time doing things you already know how to do. So let's go ahead and jump in. So as far as our geometry, like objects go, I've got an environment object here. It's just a grid, and you'll see this format that I use a lot. Grid with a transform with a null pointing out. If we go to enter geometry, this is going to look a little bit complicated, but it's not. I basically have a little switch down here so I can pick between different objects as we render. As you'll see, we're going to render a sphere, torus, a cube, some particles, and some curves. So that's just a little kind of setup there. And then I've got all these reference nulls, so we can see the spheres going into this one, torus into this one, box here, points and curves. There's a little bit of a setup for the points and the curves, and I'm just going to go through that just real quick. So you can see we've got a sphere, then I'm using a match size, zoom in here to keep it on the floor. I'm converting that to points using a points from volume, and then adjusting the color, just adding a random color with an attribute randomize, or sorry, an attribute adjust color, and then there's an attribute randomize, and this is set for p scale, and you can see it's going between a minimum value of 0.1 and 1. So this will be our copy to points. So I'm sorry, our particles, and you can see I've got a copy to points here to just test what those particles are going to look like, just as a preview right here, and then that goes out to a null. And as far as the curves go, this should look pretty familiar, but we'll go ahead and go over it anyways. We have a sphere with a match size, a points from volume, an attribute adjust color, an attribute randomize on the p scale, the exact same setup I just showed you. This is running into a pop net, and inside this pop net I've got some forces here, the drag, and our source object here. Just show the point's got an impulse, impulse count to 1, constant is turned off, so we get some trails with curves here. So we've got just some movement, and then that pop net is then wired into a trail. The trail gives us curves by using connect as polygons up here, and then that's going into a resample. To get better topology in the curve, and that's going into a stash, and then that stash is being transformed, and you'll see it's just these curves. I'm just moving them around a little bit. The important part is putting this attribute create. So there's an attribute create called width, and that's value is set to 0.01. That's really important, as this attribute is what tells Houdini what width these curves should be in the render engine. So that's a quick overview of the geometry. So let's head out to our object level here, and you'll see I created a lop net, and for that, the lop net, all I did was right click and go to lop, and then lop network, and then we'll just dive in. So at the top of this network chain here, you'll see we have a bunch of these SOP create nodes. And again, this is as easy as right click, SOP create, and then each one of these SOP creates is pointing to a piece of geometry. So if we dive in here, we'll see we've got our test geometry in a transform. If we go into the sphere, we're just merging that sphere in. Same with our box as well, and then our torus, and there's our points. And you can see that p scale working, and then we've got our curves, and then we've got our floor at the bottom. So these are all just importing our geometry into LOPS. So import geo. So next up, we just have a material library, which I'm going to cover in depth in a second. And then we've got some assignments, which this is basically telling what materials go to which object, which I'll show in a second. And then we have a dome light here with an HDR running into a camera, and then Karma settings. And we've got another assigned material. I'll just pop that in back up here. All right, so if I hit L, we'll just go ahead and organize all of this stuff. So we'll just say there's our import geometry, and then here's our materials. So when it comes to materials, we basically assign them through this material library. So if I go into the material library, you'll see we've got a bunch of these surface shaders. So to make a surface shader, all you have to do is right click, type in standard, and you'll get a Material X standard surface, which is right here. That's all these are. You'll see they're just standard surfaces. For this demo, I'm using Material X. I suggest that's what you use. It's kind of like an open source way of sharing shaders across multiple pieces of software. This will probably be the structure kind of going forward, so I would learn this Material X stuff. And then to assign one of these to an object, all you have to do is click and drag and drop. And when you do that, it creates one of these assignment materials. And you'll see in this assignment material, there's nothing in the node, but you'll see up here the primitives and the curves. So this is the material path, and this is where it's being applied to. So if we split our interface here, and I'm going to set this pane to under Solaris scene graph. You'll get, this is the USB scene graph, or USD scene graph rather. And you can see all of our objects in here. So if I select, let's go ahead and select the sphere. So if I select this sphere and I hit this plus, you can see we've got this mesh 0. And you can see if I go to these material assignments, you'll see there's a box, toy, and there should be a sphere in here somewhere. Let's see, we got toy. I may not have all these applied, which is fine. Oh, we've got a material assignment. There's 2. So this material is being applied to the box right here, and to the sphere right here, and to the torus right there. So just all this is doing is pointing these to where they should go. The last assignment material, so probably this one, looks like it's got all of the assignments in it. So we're just gonna do this from scratch real quick. I'm gonna take it through the process. So let's go ahead and just get rid of the material library and the assignments. So now we're just back to our scene stuff and our geometry. So let's make a material library. And we'll just call this stuff. And now I want to make a material first, the sphere first. So I'll jump in here, type in standard, like so. I'm just going to name this sphere, and then click, drag, and drop this onto our sphere. And it's going to say set as material on mesh 0, and we're going to say yes. So now I know that automatically dumps us back out to our LopNet, and you'll see we have a material library here and an assignment library. This is a little bit new to me too, so I'm not totally sure why it creates that duplicate library. There's nothing in it, so you just get rid of it. It's fine. And then we'll take this and then just drag our assignment down here. So you can see there's the material and there's where it's being applied to. So we could, if we wanted to, we could just make a bunch of these and manually assign them just by clicking these pluses and just changing these lines. So let's just do that for one. So we'll hit plus. And then I'm just going to copy and paste these. Now for sphere, I want to change this to box. You can see our box changed. So now that box has a material on it right now. So if I go back into our library here, it's just applying this sphere material. So we need a box material. So what we'll do is just hold down Alt and drag, and we'll just call this box. And I'm going to change the colors on these just so we know that they're applied. So you can see right now our box and our sphere have this material applied to it. So if I grab my box material, make that green, and then I'm going to grab this to my box, set it. Now we've got green. You'll go back up here and you'll see that it's put another assignment material node for us. Or rather, this one is hooked up correctly now. It knows where to go. So hopefully that makes some sense. So I'm just going to do that one more time because I know it can be confusing. At least it's confusing to me anyways. So first thing we'll do is create our standard. Oops, not standard. Our material library. Dive in, make a standard material for our material X. And I'm just going to do this all in one go here. So I'm going to call this sphere, give it a green color, box, blue, torus, different color of blue, and the other ones we don't have to worry about right now. We'll talk about that in a second here. Okay, here we are. So we've got this going. Alright, so I'm going to left click sphere, drag it to sphere, apply it, go back into that material library, apply our box, and apply our torus. And I'm just going to go ahead, delete this material library, grab our assignment here, and we should see an assignment now for all of these materials, which we do, which is working for us. So for our points here and our curves, there's a little bit different of a setup because we're reading in our color value from SOPs. So that's why I put it like an attribute color adjust or a randomized color. So this color is coming from SOP. So we don't want to assign color. We want to use that existing color. So how do we do that? So we'll just go ahead and make another shader here. We'll just call this points, like so. And we're going to need another node. So we're going to need a geometry properties. So this material X geometry property value, that is what we want here. And then I'm going to plug this into my base color. And then up here under signature, we're going to set that to color. And then under geom prop, we want to type in display color, like so. So now if I click and drag this onto my points, you'll see it kept the color, but now it's got the values of this material. So if I wanted to, I'm going to go over these settings a little bit in depth later. I'm going to go over all these settings a little bit, but just wanted to point that out. So that works for points, and this will also work for curves. So if we just grab these two, Alt drag, we'll just call this curves. Now go over here, and then I'm just going to click and drag this onto curves. I have to zoom in a little bit. And set the curves. We can see that it picked it up. Great. We're good. And then we've got this last one here. And I just wanted to show how to add a texture. So again, I'm just going to make a new shader here, and we'll call this toy. I'm just going to disconnect that. But we're going to need something called a USD UV texture. So if I select that, and then pipe our RGB into our base color, and then I'm just going to go grab a map. So I've got some in here already, so we'll just say, let's use this one, and then apply this to our toy. And it didn't look like that path worked, so let's just try, there you go, you can see it. It's applying a texture map to it. So if you want to do your own assets and bring in texture maps, this is the node that you would use. Super easy, not very difficult. So that's how we can get all of these materials. So if we go back up to our LopNet, you can see we've got this assigned material. We've got a bunch of these already assigned for us, so we are good to go. So let's jump into a couple of these materials and see what we can do. Drag this down, get it out of our way. Let's go ahead first. Let's add an HDRI to our light just to give us some better. Oh, we got one in there already. Great. Just want to make sure we've got that. In your environment light, if you select it and you under texture, you can add an HDR, which will add kind of like cool reflections and stuff for us. So let's go into this material, go into the sphere here, and talk about some of these settings. So base is our base color. And you can see this is just a multiplier, so how much of that base color do we want? You can select it here. Diffuse roughness is roughness in the diffuse channel. So if you want it to be a rougher surface, you could use that. And then metalness will make this a more metallic. Metalness and specular and diffuse roughness kind of work together. Let's just drag that down for now. So under specular, this is our specular amount. So if I pull that down, it'll get rid of our highlight here. We can bring it up to 1, and if we want to, we can add spec roughness, which will roughen that highlight out and give us a rougher surface, like so. And as a refraction, we'll deal with transmission, that's transparency, translucency rather. And then you get specular, anisotropy, and rotation. Which you probably won't mess with those. I would encourage you to just mess around with all of these, but just for time's sake, I'm not going to go into everything. And you can also adjust your specular color if you want to, and here. So let's go ahead and turn this roughness back down on all of these. Yeah, and sometimes this will kind of like freeze up on you, but don't worry about it for now. Let's just change this color just to make sure. Okay, we're going to spec color up back up to white. So now we've got a little bit of a spec channel. So one thing, if you've noticed, this is pretty cool about these renders. We're getting bounce light from other objects, from the ground, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead. We'll leave that ball there and go over to the torus. So another really cool thing that we can do is you can save presets, which I've got a couple that I've made myself. So I've got some different presets here, which they'll be in this file. So let's just use this matte blue glass. And we see we get this really cool glass look. Try another one. We'll just say thick glass. Let's try just glass. And there's a glass with no color. And then if we want to, we can always adjust these. So let's bring this roughness to about there. Try to turn this color up. Transmission depth, let's let it go through it. And if you see, if I take this to 0, it'll be completely opaque. So let's go up to our spec. Maybe mess around with this a little bit, bring the refraction down. You can see as I bring this refraction down, the effect that you're going to get. And this is basically how much refraction that the glass does. So some other stuff that we can do here. So I'm going to go back to material cool. So we're going to use this right here. So I'm going to go back out and we're going to talk about this render settings setting here. So render settings, this is where we're going to kind of deal with sampling and things like that. So the first thing you want to change is under render engine. You want to make sure you're using XPU. If you've got an RTX GPU. If not, you can use CPU. XPU is definitely recommended. And then you can change your samples right here directly. So if we go up, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this camera here. And we'll go up to cameras. And now we're going to get an actual full render. That's probably something I should mention. You want to make sure that your active node flag is at the end of this tree, so you get all of the stuff. So 120 is probably a bit too high, so we'll just go down to 64. I usually just try to make it so my render time is less than, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds. And it's up here, you can see it. So right now I'm at 2 seconds. So I'll just double this. So let's go 128 and see what we get. That's going to render for a bit. So about 5 seconds, which isn't bad. Now if we go under our, which one of these is it in here? Image output, filters, denoiser. So under filters, right now it says denoiser, there's no denoiser, so you can see we're kind of getting this noise in the shadows and some of the reflections. So we're going to turn this to the NVIDIA Optics denoiser and let that run. You can see up here under optics, it's running while we're rendering. And now we have no noise. And we're still at 5 seconds of render. So super, super, super impressive. At least in my opinion anyways. So this is how this glass should have been acting before. Before when I was doing this, I didn't have this flag highlighted, so it didn't work. So let's go ahead and go back into our materials so you can see what this should properly happen. So I've got the torus still selected, and then under presets, I'm going to click this blue glass, and you're going to see now we get a proper blue glass. We get these really nice caustic colors down here in the reflections, and that denoiser works amazing. And we're at a 5 second render for pretty much photorealistic glass. So let's go down here and take a look at our other objects. So we can see with our curves now, they have proper color, but we can also, if we go down to our curve shader, we can make them translucent. We can give them a little bit less index of refraction, so they refract a lot of stuff. So as these start to move, they're going to look like little glass tubes, which is pretty cool. And you can see we've got just our image map guy over here, which even though this map isn't built for him, he still looks pretty cool. So that is the kind of the basics overview of rendering a bunch of separate things inside of Houdini. Like I said, I'm going to give you this setup file as well with this video. So please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you very much.